Good evening. My name is Daniel Shaw. Today I will be presenting my persuasive speech on why kids should not be allowed to learn about transgenderism and other topics from the grades of kindergarten through third grade. I'm hoping to persuade my audience that kids should not be taught about this during their K through 3 curriculum. I believe that K through 3 curriculum should not be teaching or influencing kids about transgenderism and other topics similar to it because it is an extremely political agenda. It's a subject that kids do not understand at all at that age. And lastly, it can separate certain peoples from institutions depending on their personal beliefs and what they believe schools should be for their children. With change and progress, we often see a great innovation, positive change, good things happening in life, but with recent times and a greater influence of importance on acceptance, making sure people feel heard, sometimes certain ideologies are pushed more than others to the forefront. Um, Transgenderism is one of those. And at the same time, it is a very important conversation to have. I agree that it should be taught, accepted, but at the same time, there's a line in the sand that has to be drawn no matter what. I think that line in the sand is early childhood. Let me paint this picture for you. We are talking about kids who just learned to be potty trained, and they are being taught about transgenderism and issues related to that. I don't think they understand that, nor should be understanding that at that age. They can barely say the word hi, they can barely understand who their friends are, right? As a concerned citizen, I'm extremely dumbfounded. I'm horrified because kids should not be doing things, learning things like this. They should be having fun, hanging out with their friends, running outside. They shouldn't be learning about this stuff at that young of an age. Thus, K through 3 curriculum should not be about influencing and teaching kids about topics such as these. It is an extremely political agenda, as I said. It is a subject kids do not fully understand at all. And lastly, it can separate certain people from these institutions. In this paper, we will discuss why transgenderism is being pledged to be taught in K through 3 education, how these lessons and teaching and curriculum is not good for kids of that age, and how we can compromise move forward with this situation. Firstly, transgenderism is starting to build momentum into entering childhood curriculum. LGBTQ plus groups are the main ones forcing this issue. They say that it brings inequality into play if this is not the case. Time.com says LGBTQ advocates warn that the law HB 1557, which was pledged in Florida, would warn that the law would make classrooms unsafe for kids who are LGBTQ or whose family members are LGBTQ. So children already face increased rates of stigma and isolation. Groups such as Equality Florida are arguing that kids deserve to learn and understand different ideas from a lot of different areas. Secondly, opposing groups say banning of this teaching is dangerous. UPI quotes Senator Randolph Bracy of Florida, who said, "Is it worth it if one child is affected by this piece of legislation? Is it worth the child being outed or bullied or being suicidal?" These groups often argue that because these kids do not feel accepted, they don't feel very much understood. They're at a greater risk of being harmed and that they are being discriminated against. This is what the opposition to bills like HB 1557 believe is the reasons transgenderism and other similar topics should be taught in early education. Next, let's ponder as to what effect transgenderism curriculum bans would have on early education. Transgenderism bans in early education is overall, to my belief, a net positive rather than a net negative. The two main reasons for this are that we are taking away the joy and fun of early childhood memories, and that you create a political message where there should not be one. You take away a kid's right to fun in their childhood. In the New York Post article, Betsy McCaughey writes, "Transgender advocates have a right to their views, but they don't have a right to brainwash our kids with them." She's essentially saying that while it is acceptable for these people to have views, putting these viewpoints and forcing it on kids is absolutely not the way to do it. I agree with her. I don't think putting these issues on kids of that age is necessary. They barely know how to learn. They're just beginning school. They wouldn't understand these topics. Secondly, you are putting a political message into curriculum. The Washington Post says it would be a mild understatement to say this is controversial. Religious conservatives fought this, as one might expect, but one doesn't have to be a religious conservative to wonder if this isn't a misplaced policy that says more about adults' ideologies than children's needs. Essentially, they're saying that putting this into children's curriculums would do a lot of harm because you make this into something it should not be about. You're forcing the ideologies of adults into the brains of kids when there's no need at that age. These could, at the end of the day, do more harm rather than good. Lastly, let's learn about a potential solution, a potential compromise for this. One thing that could be legislated is that transgenderism should be taught in schools, but only when kids reach a certain age where they can understand what these ideas and concepts are and make a decision for themselves. We can achieve this objective from both a political level and a social level. Firstly, we can make sure that the LGBTQ community feels good and feels accepted about it by putting legislation that satisfies their community and make it that they want to have a compromise there. In turn, this would allow for a public opinion to be positive and for there to be much less backlash at the end of the day, which is absolutely essential in today's day and age. Secondly, we can make sure socially that it is accepted. The New York Times wrote this on the power of Twitter. Online activism and commentary that take place on Twitter are often dismissed as expressions of cancel culture or woke culture, but a closer look reveals what's really happening. Many people who lacked public platforms 10 years ago, the young and members of marginalized groups in particular, are speaking up and they're insisting on being heard. By using social platforms to push the message across, we will see flourishment of this issue socially and allow for it to reach its full potential. While it's not perfect, a compromise is absolutely what works the best because it satisfies the needs and requests from both sides to make a perfect middle ground. So, to conclude, we looked at what transgenderism curriculum is in early education and how it could be a problem and how there's a solution to compromise. In an ideal world, we could leave these hot button issues to adults and people who can talk and argue for or against them, not push these agendas on young children. And ultimately, keeping these lessons out of early education will allow each and every child a chance to have a fun, carefree childhood.